Welcome to this explainer. We're unpacking a story today that has literally terrified audiences for decades, but we are definitely not looking at Hollywood fiction. We're diving straight into the chilling, heavily documented 1949 case of Roland Doe. This is the actual true inspiration for the most famous horror story of all time, The Exorcist. That 1973 film is still ranked at the absolute top of horror lists, often considered just too terrifying to even recommend to people. But the real events, they were so intensely disturbing that the true names of the family and the victim, a boy known to us only by the pseudonym Roland, had to be completely hidden from the public. So, let's just dive right into this.
Picture this. You wake up in the pitch black of the middle of the night. The house is quiet, everyone's supposed to be asleep. Suddenly, you hear this undeniable sound of scratching coming from a bedroom. Now, you probably assume it's mice, right? Maybe a pest problem, but then the scratching is accompanied by crying. So you go upstairs to check, and you find your 14-year-old child on the floor. When you ask them what they're doing, they look up at you and deliver this absolutely terrifying response. "I am not doing this. Someone else is making me do this." It is a parent's absolute worst nightmare, and it's exactly where our analysis of this case begins.
Section 1. The beginning of the true story. To really grasp the gravity of this anomaly, long before any dramatic movie sets or special effects, we have to look at how perfectly normal the baseline was. It's 1949, and our subject is a completely 100% ordinary 14-year-old boy named Roland. He was just your average American kid. He went to school, played, joked around, did his homework. There was absolutely nothing dark or unusual about his life. He didn't have a ton of siblings or friends around the house to play with, so he spent a good amount of time just keeping to himself. It was an incredibly mundane, peaceful existence. That is, until a seemingly innocent family visit changed everything.
This brings us to Section 2, the mystery of the Ouija board. This is where a major catalyst enters the historical record of this case.
So Roland's Aunt Harriet, whom he affectionately called Aunt Tilly, comes to visit. Noticing that Roland didn't really have many indoor games to play, she introduces him to a brand new one, the Ouija board. Now, Aunt Tilly treated it as just a fun, harmless indoor game to pass the time, but historically, this board is intended to communicate with entities from the other side. Roland was super excited. They played the game together, laughing, taking the whole shebang very lightly as a joke. He had absolutely no idea that this simple piece of cardboard and wood was going to permanently alter the course of his life.
But the seemingly innocent introduction quickly spiraled into tragedy. Just a short time after introducing Roland to the board, Aunt Tilly unexpectedly passes away, and to this day, researchers have found no clear explanation for her sudden death. This left Roland completely isolated. The one person he played this mysterious game with was suddenly just gone, and this massive vacuum of grief and loneliness, it essentially set the stage for the terrifying anomalies that would soon plague his home.
Moving to Section 3, the grip of demonic forces. What started out as subtle, easily dismissed disturbances quickly escalated into what witnesses could only describe as the terrifying grip of an unseen, malevolent presence.
Okay, let's look at how the phenomena actually began. It started with Roland's parents hearing scratching from his room. When they checked, nothing there. Then, specifically around 3:30 in the morning, the scratching escalated in volume, and was accompanied by crying. One night, the parents aggressively asked if Roland was just playing a prank. Silence. But the second they turned to leave, that distinct scratching returned. Eventually, these sounds evolved into unnatural, demonic voices coming directly from their son, speaking in a tone that clearly did not belong to a 14-year-old boy.
And this is where we hit a truly terrifying turning point for the family. Desperate, Roland's mother suspected her deceased sister might be trying to reach out. Standing near the room, she speaks desperately into the empty air. "If this is you, Tilly, knock on the door 3 times. Immediately, 3 distinct heavy knocks echoed on the door. But it quickly became apparent that whatever this was, it was for sure not the benevolent spirit of Aunt Tilly. A normal spirit wouldn't terrorize a family with such chaotic noises.
Things started escalating at school, too.
Roland began throwing objects and speaking in an unknown language with that demonic voice. His mom, desperate for answers, starts consulting experts, and the results were absolutely baffling. First, a psychologist evaluates him and claims Roland is 100% fine. Actually, scratch that. Perfectly normal physically and mentally. Unsatisfied, they call Father Luther Miles Scholes. He lets Roland stay at his house for observation, only to witness a rocking chair moving in impossible, unnatural circles before Roland is violently thrown from it. Finally, they visit Father Hughes. The moment Roland sat at his desk, a heavy telephone violently flew across the room and smashed, and Roland began speaking in that terrifying voice again. These professionals weren't just guessing, they were witnessing impossible physical phenomena themselves.
It was Father Hughes who linked the phenomena back to the Ouija board, realizing an incredibly powerful entity had taken hold. As Father Hughes began praying, Roland's demeanor changed drastically. Right in front of their eyes, deep red scratches began to physically manifest and carve themselves directly onto Roland's skin. And they weren't random scratches. They formed a very specific word, Lewis. It was this ominous, literal sign etched right into the boy's body.
Section 4. The Journey to St. Louis. Following that ominous clue literally etched into Roland, the family embarks on a journey to St. Louis, Missouri.
But far from escaping the entity, the haunting only escalated in St. Louis, and the level of violence became staggering. Objects were violently flying around the relative's house. Roland's cousin, who was a student at St. Louis University, witnessed the chaos and alerted a senior archbishop. The pattern became incredibly deceptive. By day, Roland would act like a completely normal, playful teenager, but as soon as night fell, his body would become uncontrollably violent, attempting to bite anyone who came near, and witnesses reported seeing him literally levitating above his bed. No way around it. Things were completely out of control.
The church appointed Father Bodern to begin Roman rituals. But they didn't just rely on spiritual help, they brought in science. Enter Professor Bob, a scientist and seasoned paranormal investigator. He meticulously took notes, trying to apply pure logic to the situation. But even he was rendered powerless when an invisible force picked up a heavy lamp and hurled it directly at him. The conclusion was unanimous here. Roland was simply too dangerous and too powerful to be kept in a residential home. He needed to be moved to a highly controlled environment.
This brings us to Section 5, the terrifying exorcism, the climax of our explainer.
The events in that psychiatric ward are what directly inspired the movie. Roland, levitating and standing rigidly in the air, managed to tear a purple shawl right off a priest. In response, the priests enacted a desperate sequence. First, they brought in a statue of St. Michael, the spiritual warrior historically known for defeating demons. The reaction was instantaneous. Roland began foaming at the mouth, his skin color shifted dramatically, and a booming voice mimicking St. Michael echoed right from his throat. As his limbs contorted unnaturally, the priest bound him with a purple cloth to keep him from hurting himself. Finally, they aggressively applied holy water while demanding the spirit leave.
It was an immensely violent struggle, a true battle of wills. But finally, immediately after the holy water was applied, the tension just broke. Roland fell out of the air, collapsing back onto the hospital bed. The room fell completely silent. Then, from Roland's lips, a faint, exhausted voice uttered 3 words. "He is gone." At that exact moment, across the hospital campus, witnesses reported seeing a massive shadow of St. Michael cast upon a nearby church. The priests immediately locked the room, leaving their ritual books and the statue inside, sealing the terrifying event away from the world.
Section 6. The NASA Scientist. And now we reach the most mind-blowing resolution of this entire case.
For decades, the media only caught whispers of what happened. But, in an incredible twist of fate, Roland completely recovered. He didn't suffer a lifetime of institutionalization, he simply went back to being a normal boy. He finished his schooling, moved past the massive trauma, and grew up to live a highly productive life. But he didn't just get a normal job. Think about this. The 14-year-old victim of an extreme, unexplainable paranormal event grew up to become a highly successful, exceptionally logic-driven rocket scientist for NASA. He spent his career rooted in the exact mathematical realities of aerospace engineering.
And that leaves us with a truly fascinating paradox to ponder. It's one thing to survive a terrifying ordeal, but how does the boy at the absolute center of history's most unexplainable supernatural event dedicate his adult life to the most exact, rigorous science known to humanity? Did experiencing the absolute extreme of the unexplainable drive him to seek comfort in the absolute certainty of mathematics and physics? It's a massive question that adds an incredible layer of depth to an already chilling true story. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive into the real records has sparked your curiosity about the strange lines between the unexplained and the proven,